was Alternative Career Paths for Engineers, but the subtitle was really around customer-centric engineering roles that people may not be aware of or have never considered as part of their career path. So my goal today is to walk you through some engineering, customer-centric roles where you absolutely need an engineering degree or some sort of a technical degree, but it gives you a much broader exposure to the customer side of things, be it on the marketing side with pipeline generation, on the pre-sale side with working with customers on, identifying what business problems you could solve with your particular product that you're supporting, or even on the post-sale side, everything from professional services, technical account management, customer success, number of other things that you could address on the post-sale side, still working with your customers and leveraging your engineering or your technical skill set. As an introduction, again, my name is Jane Paek. I manage a number of solutions architects at Redis Labs. My team consists of a number of people in the West Coast, but I also have another team out in the US South, which is like Atlanta South. So they cover a pretty broad area within the United States. And our goal is to enable customers to understand our technology better, to identify also whether we could help them solve interesting business problems. And I'll get into that as part of my presentation. Okay. I currently work for Redis Labs. It's based in Mountain View. Most of our engineering team is in Israel, Tel Aviv. And I wanted to thank Simple Steps for inviting me and allowing me to make this presentation, because I'm all about enabling more people to think about different career paths, especially around customer-centric career options. And I'm biased because I think being a pre-sales engineer or a solutions architect is one of the best roles, but I'll try to temper down my enthusiasm. So 64%. I thought this was an interesting number to highlight, because in preparation for this presentation, I decided to just do some searching on Indeed and compare, well, what percentage of the roles are related to software engineering versus developers, software engineering and developers versus all of the other customer-centric roles that I was looking into. Like if you were a product manager, a product marketing manager, if you're into a developer advocacy, so those are on the pipeline generation side, or if you're on the pre-sale side, technical, pre-sales engineers, sales consultants, solutions architects, and a lot of the post-sales titles that I've described, and I realized 64% of all the jobs that I search for are related to customer-centric roles versus the others are on the development side, okay? So specifically, I did the search on July 15th, but of the 370 posts that I looked for across all of these name titles, and I would hazard to guess that, I just did search on both the software engineer and developer, more of a developer skill set, but this is probably blended, so there's an overlap between the two. But I decided to give it the benefit of the doubt to say, like, if you are only focused on development or looking at a software engineering role, you're really shortcutting yourself on other opportunities within the field where you could really develop and leverage your technical expertise, but then get the opportunity to expose yourself to other business aspects of how an organization is run. Okay, so I will walk through some of these roles, their perks, their traits, their metrics, and what you may want to consider as part of your decision factor on, is this the right type of role for you, depending on what you like to do, okay? Just to separate, why is there a color difference? So the blue is indicating more of the developer side. The purple is all around the marketing aspect. So once you start getting into broadly, if you have a product, who touches or who engages in the distribution of that product, right? So in the marketing teams, they tend to look at it from a one to many. If you take a piece of content or initiative or a campaign, how do you broadcast it widely to take that content and distribute it to many, many people? So you're creating the top of funnel opportunity. And then the pre-sales roles are more on the green side, where you're narrowing it down to people who are actively engaged in selling and representing that technology before the purchase order. And then the yellow components are all of the different roles that are involved in actually really enabling customers and making them successful so that they can continue to engage and make your product better and continue to become your customer and stay your customer. Okay. Right. So in terms of the customer engagement cycle, I went over this, but along the market development front, the typical titles that you hear will be the product managers, the product marketing manager. And as the open source community really developed, there is another role called the developer advocate. Okay. So in this sense, these are all roles where you're looking at the broader market and looking at the customer base, but you're approaching it from a more strategic perspective of enabling them or understanding the market or promoting into the market to create awareness for the product. Okay. The pre-sales role, and right now I just have the two titles, sales engineer and solutions architect, but there's other roles, actually other titles for the same role. You'll see things like sales consulting, pre-sales engineer, pre-sales consulting, but as you're doing your job searches and looking for these titles, be a little bit flexible on what type of titles you search for, mainly because solutions architect could be both pre-sales or internal technical solution architect for an internal project. That's the one thing that I find ambiguous about the title solutions architect. At Redis Labs, we use the term solutions architect to be more pre-sales focused. And in other organizations, I had a sales consulting role, a pre-sales consultant, a pre-sales engineer. So just be aware that there may be other titles related to the pre-sales role itself. Okay. And then on the post-sales side, there's a ton of activity on pro-sales, professional services, a technical trainer, technical account manager, customer success manager, support engineer. So I'll try to cover some of these roles in a little bit more depth on how they're metriced and what are the skill sets that we typically look for across the different titles that you see here. So before I go on any further, one thing I want to highlight is that just because you enter into one role, one title, it doesn't mean that you stay there forever or that you're committed to it forever. And I'll describe my own personal journey, but as I get into the solutions architect team and how they work, I'll describe my team as well, because they're pretty diverse in both experience, their maturity within their career life cycle, and all the different backgrounds that they come from before becoming a solutions architect at Redis Labs. So my personal journey, we all start with a blank plate, right? Personally, I graduated with an electrical engineering degree from Canada. And I'll be honest, I went through a co-op program. And after all the different terms of the co-op program, I realized I did not want to be an electrical engineer. I did not want to have anything to do with electrical engineering. So thankfully, upon graduation, Oracle did a recruiting event and they had an internship program. And that's really how I started in the software industry, just skipping over anything related to electrical hardware engineering and getting directly into software. From Oracle, the intern program I found was very, very effective. So I think there's some of you who are about to graduate. Something that you may consider is there's a number of companies who do have intern programs. They're a little bit different than what I went through, but specific for Oracle, they had a rotational program where you get to try out different roles. And so the first role I went into was a support engineer. Then I transitioned into a solutions architect or a sales consultant. And then my last term at Oracle, they stopped the intern program and I stayed on as a technical instructor. So I tried 3 very different roles, but they were all customer centric. And I have to tell you, I loved them all. The 2 that I really, really enjoyed was sales consulting and technical instructor. And I was young enough where I blindly went into the technical instructor role without realizing that this required close to 90% travel. I hit every single province in Canada except for Prince Edward Island. I flew to Belgium to teach another technical training class. But I got to present. I really was able to hone in my communication skills. And on the sales consulting side, got a little bit more exposure into how businesses or customers buy. Right? What is the typical process in which they evaluate a product and how they make a decision on moving forward or not? I also got to meet some amazing support engineers. Some of the people that I worked with in support at Oracle, they had been there for 10, 15 years. And it was really interesting to get their perspective about why they liked this particular role, what type of work-life balance they were able to accomplish by being a support engineer versus a sales consultant versus an instructor, okay? Or actually a professional services consultant as well. So I had my technical engineering degree. I also got a lot of exposure into the different roles within Oracle. But in parallel, one of the things I enrolled into was Toastmasters. And I don't know whether everyone's heard of Toastmasters, but I think it's one of the best low-cost way of improving your communication skills. They're very rigid on the format. They're very, very structured on how you even start, how they run the meeting, but they give you so much exposure to speaking in a formal way, writing your presentations, or more from a dynamic perspective about how to react, how do you evaluate, how to provide comment. So as you're looking at customer-centric roles, I also encourage you to evaluate, are you comfortable speaking in front of people? And is that a skill set that you want to develop? Toastmasters is an excellent path to take. Okay. So from Canada, I moved to the United States in the Bay Area. And I've been here ever since. I've been here since 1999. I started in Sunnyvale, moved to moved to Fremont, then moved to Redwood City, then to Santa Clara, and then to Mountain View, all within 5 years. So I basically circumnavigated the Bay. I started with a company called Precise as a pre-sales engineer. They were acquired by Veritas, who then was acquired by Symantec. They all have, but Precise was a company based in Boston, but Veritas was based in Mountain View and Symantec was based in Cupertino, right? So through all the different changes, I transitioned from a pre-sales engineer to the senior manager of strategic planning in the office of the CTO. And my one reflection on myself was, I realized going from field into a strategic office, after 6 months, I realized this is not me. It's a little bit too ivory tower. Did a lot of very interesting market research and presentations for executive board level presentations. We would create the slides, but I missed engaging with customers, engaging with the field, engaging with partners on really understanding what's driving the world, right? So I transitioned back into the field, into the emerging product specialist, and I decided to also take almost like a parallel switch into account management, literally into sales, to see what that side of the world was. And for me, it was quite enlightening in that we would walk into the same meetings from someone who's technical versus someone who's sales, and you actually get two different perspectives about how well that meeting went. But I learned a ton becoming an account manager at Symantec. So while I was in my account manager role, while I was within the 3 roles, I also got my MBA from Berkeley, just because I wanted to get a better understanding of what it would take potentially to start a company or be a leader within any organization. And I also tried out an improv class down at the San Jose. Actually, I think they may be shut down for now, but there's a number of improv, I guess, theaters, but this one specifically, CSC, was a program where you could sign up for regular classes and you're engaging with the team on different skill sets around improv. And I thought it was really interesting as a parallel skill. Toastmasters tends to be very structured and formal, whereas improv, once you start working with people, you realize you have to pivot based on the response that you get. So you really learn how to listen, okay? So I thought improv was really cool. It was a ton of fun as well. So anyone interested, I would also recommend that you take a look at improv, okay? Now, after Symantec, I decided to take a maternity leave because I was giving birth to our daughter. I was thinking of taking about a 3-month gap. I realized, 3 months is too short. It was 2008, so I opted to step out of the workforce. I thought I would do it for about 2.5, 3 years. And it turned into a 7-year gap, partly because within like after my daughter turned about 2.5, I was pregnant with my son. I also got diagnosed with cancer. So in the middle of all this craziness, it was a 7-year gap. Everything went well, but it was a lot longer of a gap than I anticipated, right? I'm fine now. All the screens are great. But at the end of the 7 years, I started thinking about, well, how do I get back into the workforce? Because I'd like to go back. I really enjoyed working, and I think this was the right time. And I really had to do a lot of soul searching to understand, like, 7 years is a long time in tech. Who would even hire me, right? What type of role would I be good at? What type of role do I want to do? Like, so I started doing some research on just in general, what are the customer-centric roles that I think I'd like to do? I really thought I'd like to go back into pre-sales, but the biggest issue that I had was, I'm like, do I even have the technical chops to go back? Technology's changed so much, right? And I'd had to evaluate, like, what tech stack do I need to revamp my skill set on? So as I was working through that in parallel, I did send out a couple of resumes, and for the vast majority of resumes, it just goes into a black hole. I did get a call back for a couple. But then I also started meeting up with a lot of people that I lost connection with like years ago. So going out for coffees, just calling, we'd set up like just a quick call over the phone. Hey, how are you doing? And you know what? People were fantastic at spending time with me, giving me advice about, where should I start? Oh, can you give me your resume? Make it out. Maybe I could pass it on to this particular team who has a headcount. And one of those was a call into an old colleague of mine. He was a VP of sales engineering at a company called Sav1. And we chatted. He goes, hey, you know what? I have an opening in the Bay Area. Do you want to interview? I said, sure. He connected me with a couple of people in the area for the role as a pre-sales engineer, even though I had a 7-year gap. And through the interview process, one of my friends sent me this very odd link. It was about how you prepare for an interview. And it basically said, before you walk into an interview, pretend that you're a superhero. Pick your favorite superhero, give yourself the most superhero position, hold yourself in that position for about 1 minute, 2 minutes, and all that energy will help rev you up before you go for the interview. I'm like, okay. So as odd as it may sound, I did try it. I walked into the cafe, meeting with the VP of sales who was running the West region. And we had a great conversation. I think that was a huge confidence booster for me because I was in the mental mindset of being able to, be confident about what I was going to bring into the role. Okay. From submitting the resume to actually starting my first role, and this is very, very unusual, I must say, it took about a month. And so I started my role as a sales consultant at Sav1. The company's based in Delaware. I flew to Delaware over the weekend to start their boot camp. And it was a fantastic experience. I originally started with the regional territory, but I have to say, being a parent really gave me a lot of confidence as well as organizational skills. And that was the thing that I really brought into managing our strategic accounts. So I handled some of the largest strategic accounts at Sav1 with huge amounts of revenue. 1 year we closed like $10 million in revenue. For a startup company, it's pretty large. And after Sav1, and by the way, Sav1 is a great network monitoring company. They're used by some of the largest telcos and startups in the world, not startups, but larger enterprises in the world to monitor their production networks. And then from there, I joined Redis. I happened to look for a company that was more local because Sav1, I always work remote. And I started at Redis as a solutions architect and got promoted to an SA manager, and now I'm the SA director, okay? And just a plug for Redis, we have a Redis University, so I encourage everyone, if you're going to, enable your kind of technical skill set, Redis is a great technology to actually invest time in. Okay. So that's my personal journey. It's a little bit unusual with the 7-year gap. It's a little bit unusual how quickly I was able to get back into a tech role. But I wanted to let people know that it is possible. And a big factor is confidence, because your ability to listen and your ability to articulate and your ability to learn If you have a network of people who recognize those skills, you will be able to get hired into roles that you may not have done before. Okay. So let's talk about my favorite role. I've described a number of different titles in the customer-centric role. I personally think as an engineer, this sales engineering, solutions architect, pre-sales engineering role is one of the best roles out there, namely because it's such a cool blend of technology and business skills, compensation, as well as a sense of urgency and solving problems and I said technology. So broadly, what is a profile of a sales engineer? Like, what does a job look like, right? So you're metriced on quota. And for people who are a little bit uncomfortable with, oh, you're in sales, I personally think everyone's in sales, everyone in marketing, we're all in sales because we are all trying to promote something, be it ourselves, be it our product, be it our service. So specific to sales engineering and SAs, quota means that you get tied to a territory, you could get tied to a region, you could be tied to the entire company's goals for meeting some specific sales targets, okay? So you have quota, you're measured on how well you've attained your quota, but your compensation is broken up on what's known as an on-target earnings, where they basically say, if you meet your quota, then you will make your on-target earning. But that on-target earning is split between base salary and a variable. So the base is, let's assume, we'll just randomly say if it's your OTE is 100,000, your base would be 70,000, and your variable is 30,000. But many people or many companies allow you to choose. So, at Redis, there is some flexibility around how much you want on your base versus variable. I have some friends who are VPs in other companies, and they're like, we let our solutions architects choose everything from 0 base to 100% variable, but nothing lower than they won't let you do 90% base and 10% variable. Now, why is the variable piece interesting, right? Most of the sales roles, the variable piece is unbounded, which means if you're really, really successful and you're able to meet your quota, then you get into what's known as accelerators. And so the compensation based on your accelerators, if you take a higher variable as part of your base, then that variable then leads into a higher acceleration scale as you make more and more quota, as you make more sales above and beyond your quota. Okay, so there's a really nice upside potential, but it is volatile because that variable, if it is rather large, 1 year you could do incredibly well. The next year, depending on how your customers and your patch does, you may not do as well on the variable side. So you have to be willing to take a little bit of risk, but you could also be very confident based on your ability to sell, whether you're going to go above and beyond your quota. The ideal profile, technical skills, this is going to vary depending on what technology you sell. And it's interesting because I talk to people about, if you're a solutions architect at Zoom, the type of technical skills you need is very different than if you're a technical solutions architect at Redis Labs. And so depending on the technology that you're representing, the depth of technology that you have to understand and the breadth of it that you understand may differ quite significantly. And it also depends on which company you work for, if it's a small company or if it's a very large company. If you're a large company, your technical requirement could be very narrow because you have a whole separate group of people, be it extensions for specialists, evangelists, on your support side, on your professional services side, who could complement you on your technical portfolio. If you're a smaller company, if you're a startup company, your technical skills need to be much broader, I find, just because you need to be able to assess, troubleshooting on the network side, and the cloud side, and the infrastructure, as well as all of the tangential technologies that bolt into your product. Business skills is a really subtle skill, and people who have business acumen are very successful as a sales engineer, solutions architect. And what I mean by that is your ability to understand why a customer wants to use your product. What kind of needs do they have? Are they driven because of some constraints around OpEx or CapEx? and what is the business metrics that they need to address, and how do we align to that, right? Communication and clarity, I think it's pretty clear. If you're going to be representing the product, you have to be very clear and articulate about what it does and how it works. Problem solver, namely because the customers don't give you a problem on a plate and say, can you do this? Often it's a dialogue about, we're trying to solve this. What is the right path to do it? And you really have to think more broadly about, how, given a problem, what are all the different options and paths that the customer could take, and you guide them through the right one that is best for the customer. And the last one is urgency. I have a sales counterpart. Her constant litany is time kills deals. And so the faster we respond to the customer to ensure that their concerns are met, their questions are met, they get a better sense and an understanding of how quickly we work. And if they have budget, then we want to make sure that they're allocating that budget quickly or in the correct manner to the project that we're assigned. Because sometimes, these random things like a huge pandemic occurs and all of a sudden the budgets get completely reallocated, okay? A couple of perks for the role that many people don't realize. So travel is a perk and a negative for some people. Most of the people on my team, we are itching to travel. We feel very caged in because of COVID. You could travel quite widely, but you do get to travel to interesting places, try out new restaurants, you just really discover different cities and get the feel of it. There's club trips. I think that seems to be more of a sales thing, but if you do make your number, the company rewards the account managers as well as the SAs and say, you guys have done a great job for the year. We're going to celebrate. And we're going to invite the people who've actually made their number into these club trips. So I've had the luxury of going to Cayman Islands most recently, but then we've also been to Sydney, Australia, Turks and Caicos, Cancun, and companies really differ, but people outside of sales don't realize that solutions architects and sales engineers also participate in a lot of these very nice all-inclusive club trips. And you also get executive visibility. You're talking to VPs, directors, CIOs. You do a lot of, executive sessions where we all bring them together and have the executives talk to each other, but you also get exposure to, how do executives think? And being in sales, we represent the customer a lot. So we also have internal executive visibility because they understand the criticality of certain requests and you're representing the customer. So you're making the connections through that path. Interview process, it's a technical role. And for almost all of the technical roles that we have at Redis, there's a technical exercise, there's a whiteboard, and we also do presentations. For those of you who do presentations for, sales, marketing, those types of roles, some companies will give you their own deck and ask you to present. We at Redis, we believe that, you take your own, you're most comfortable when you're presenting content that you are familiar with. And our goal is to really assess how you organize your thoughts, how you present, because we're asking you to, educate us on something that you're passionate about. So there's a lot of soft skills that we test for, but the presentation that we provide, 5-10 minutes, as long as you put in the time and you're able to, really present well, that is how we do our presentation stack, right? And this is all in conjunction with all of the, hiring manager presentations, the recruiter presentation, sorry, not presentations, but interviews with the hiring manager, the recruiter, interview with a solutions architect or someone who would be your peer, just to get an understanding of what is the day-to-day work or activity or engagement for the SAs, right? And also what the team is like. Travel varies a lot on the territory that you cover. I've been in the Bay Area for almost 20 years. I will say that travel was not high, like, and I'm talking about getting on a plane and going somewhere, right? Because there's a huge concentration of customers in the Bay Area. Most of the time I'm hopping in my car and driving up to San Francisco or somewhere along the peninsula, sometimes in the East Bay, maybe all the way out to Folsom for Intel or somewhere down South Bay. Other people on my team, they travel a lot more. I have one of the people on my team, like he traveled close to 70% of his time, and he would book his travel out 6 weeks in advance. He was okay with it. He enjoyed it, and he occasionally would bring his family for travel with him. But it really depends on your territory. In this current climate, no one travels. We're doing our job all over the internet, over like Zoom and so on. And it's been effective, but we still miss the travel and we still miss seeing customers face to face. Okay. All right. So day to day, like what do we do? Remember, our goal is to listen, because the better we listen, the more accurately we'll be able to guide our customers to the right path on technology deployment, technology choice, as well as kind of long-term planning. So we try to be the customer advocate, the trusted advisor, the voice of the customer, the company ambassadors. So some of them are out-facing and some of them are in-facing. The SA's role is interesting in that it straddles all three layers around engaging with the customer. We do market development via webinars, trade shows, lunch and learns, partner engagement. And we will fly for these, the trade show specifically. A lot of conferences happen down in San Diego, in Vegas, in San Francisco. So most of my team covers the West Coast trade shows, but my East Coast teams cover obviously the East Coast trade shows. And I have a counterpart in EMEA who covers a lot of the East Coast, so EMEA kind of marketing activities. And then narrowly, specifically around the pre-sales engagement, when a customer says, hey, I'd like to understand what your product does because I have a problem, then we go through the customer discovery cycle where we ask a ton of questions to really understand, what is it that you want to accomplish and is it a good fit for us, right? We'll do presentations, demos and proof of concepts, deployment design, territory planning with their account manager. So there's a lot of involvement working with the customer and ensuring that at the end of it, we get technical validation. And then we hand it off to the sales partner who typically does all of the contracts, all of the M&As, the legal requirements to carry it into the purchase order process. Okay. And then, once a customer becomes a customer, then even though we're a sales engineer, the most effective sales engineers are the ones who have the closest relationship with their existing customers. Because the customer may buy the first time for a $25,000, $35,000, $50,000 deal, but that customer could grow into $1 million, $2 million, $10 million customer. Okay, so for example, some of the customers that we engage with, their very first purchase was very small, $35,000, right? But now they're a $2 million customer ARR just because of all the additional use cases in which they've identified that will be a good fit. So we participate in the onboarding, support escalations, quarterly business reviews with the customer. We review their deployments, their upgrades, and I think I have a little typo on the engineer side. So we are always planning, learning, and creating and sharing with the customer, but also internally with our team, because we have to work with the SA team itself to make sure that we're not trying to do something that's not recommended. So we learn from each other. We also create a lot of content to share with each other, and we have a ton of code that we share with our customers as well as ourselves and our demos. Okay. And just to let you know, and I don't want this to be a technical, oh my God, this is way too deep type of thing, this is what the ecosystem that my team plays in, right? We have to cover all three different clouds in different flavors. We have to understand if a customer wants to deploy in Kubernetes, how does our solution work in Kubernetes? We then have our quasi partner and competitive technologies, be it Elastic for search, Kafka for messaging, Neo4j for graph, and then a lot of the underlying data around Oracle and data mapping, be it MySQL, Hadoop, or Cassandra or Spark. Okay, and then we touch a lot of languages and Python, Go. So my intention is solutions architects tend to have to deal with many, many different technologies very broadly. And I will let you know, there is not a single person on my team who knows everything about everything. So we try to complement, we try to educate, and we share our expertise so that we're always enabling each other. If we don't know, then somebody else should be able to help you. So it's a very partner-driven type of organization, partnership-driven organization. Okay. One thing I wanted to highlight, I think I was planning to mention this before. What does my team look like, right? And so a sales engineer, or a pre-sales or solutions architect role, the skill set and the expertise of my team, the most junior person probably has around 4 years of experience. More senior people have more than 25 years of experience. And the level of experience that they have, many of them were not pre-sales engineers before they joined Redis, but they've had development background, they have SRE background, DevOps background, they were previously professional services, they were consultants before. So their experience is very broad. Many of them have not had a customer type of role before. So as part of the screening process, what we're really looking for is, do you have the aptitude and the ability to learn, or the ability to pivot and to be coached into the right type of skill set that we're looking for. And I would say that's consistent across all the customer-centric roles. Most companies are willing to invest in you via kind of the technical enablement on the product, broadly around the platforms that we'd like you to support. And we'll even help you get your certification. We have a number of SAs all going through AWS certification, both for associate as well as pro. We're also getting into Azure as well as for Google, the GCP certification as well. Okay, so companies are willing to invest as long as you're able to show that you have the aptitude and the coachability to be able to learn what they want you to learn. All right, so let's talk about the technical product management role, and let me know if I'm getting too slow, if I'm taking too long. So the TPM role is really on the market development side. It's all at the top of the funnel, as they call it, right? Like, how are we going to make our message known? How do people become aware of what solution we have? What is the industry that we're targeting? What are the personas that should be aware of what we do, right? So technical product marketing team, they're not the people who run the events, but they're the people who create the content. So they're metriced on how much content are you creating? And I'll get into a little bit about what does that content consist of. And I have a lot of friends who are in technical product marketing, and I cannot do what they do because they're very good at writing emails and they could craft the perfect paragraph. And I bow to them about their ability to create good content so quickly. The compensation structure is base plus MBO, and the split is typically 90-10, or it could be 80-20. Really depends on what you negotiate. And the MBOs are typically tied to content delivery. Okay. Profile, technical, communicates well, organized, I would also say articulate. Some of the perks, you do get to travel to some cool exotic places. I find that marketing people are very team-centric. They tend to be more strategic because they need to know what the market is looking for. So they have a much broader view of the market, not tactical onto the individual accounts and what features they need. And the travel varies. My friend switched from product management to technical product marketing because she wanted less travel. Having said it, I've met a lot of technical product managers who travel a ton, and some of them at 70%, but they're more at the evangelist level, where they're traveling around the world doing a lot of seminars and presenting a lot of this content. So if you're looking for this role, also identify as part of your interview process, like, what is the percentage travel that they believe this role entails, and see if that's comfortable for you. Okay, so what do they do? Like, what type of content do they create? So they're all about, demand generation, inbound marketing content, emails, webinars, campaigns, and demos, right? The awareness stuff, all the event support, investor relations, and customer advocacy content. And then they really do a lot of like investor relations, which I was surprised at. So they do a lot of the interviews, the presentations to investor relations, and then they also create a lot of strategic content for partners and customers. They also focus on sales playbooks. So as part of a launch of a product, If you're part of the product manager, product marketing manager, review or sales operations, you have to look at what the go-to-market strategy is. So the product marketing manager is going to take the product that the product team has created and start creating playbooks, right? Here's a new product that we're going to launch. What is a campaign that we're going to use? What is the content that we're going to provide? And what are the sales teams going to do at the different layers between the sales development managers versus the account manager versus the SA versus like, what are the webinars that we're going to launch? And what are the competitive spaces and where is our positioning against our competitors? Okay, so they do some really cool stuff. By the way, one person cannot do all of this. A lot of the roles are partitioned. The smaller the company, the more you get exposed to all the different layers. The larger the company, the more narrow your scope is. I worked at Symantec where one person's sole role is for competitive analysis, or another person's sole role is pricing, right? So it really depends. And then, on the post-sale side, so remember the technical product marketing managers on the market development, all of the market, the pipeline generation side. On the flip side, there's a ton of post-sales roles. So the technical account manager and the customer success managers focus on the happiness of the customer. So they're metriced on customer retention, expansion, customer satisfaction, and customer loyalty. When I started looking to get back into the workforce, customer success as a term was kind of new, and it branched off from all of these services-based companies, the SaaS-based companies, where they realized that, oh, these companies are not giving you you're not selling them a perpetual license with maintenance over the next couple of years. You're really selling a service that the customers could choose to actually decide whether they want to renew year after year after year. So an entire industry was formed around customer success and customer success engineers. And by the way, I think there's some people who had said that they're not in technology or tech field and they want to get into some sort of like technology company. Even if you're not an engineer, there are customer success manager roles where your job is to review the analytics of how certain customers are using the services that they purchased, identify whether there's some metric that it looks like they're not using this or they're only using a portion of it, who's using it. And there's a person who's focused on the business side of the customer retention, whereas the customer success engineer focuses on the technology side of customer retention. Redis, for the most part, we have a technical account manager, and that role has been around for a long time, and it's really to enable customers technically to be more successful, because you have a partner who's with you in post-sales to understand how you're really using the technology, and we're going to help you continue to grow with the technology over time, okay? So the profile, again, technical, able to learn, organize, communicates well. And notice there's some, common patterns across all these roles, right? But the one thing about the TAM or the CSE role is travel. So for people who can't travel, these are great options in that travel is pretty minimal. Occasionally we ask them to travel to visit the customer maybe once a quarter, some of them never. And we also, you may be invited to a QBR with the sales team, because as a sales team, we have regular quarterly business reviews amongst ourselves. But in general, TAMs and CSEs do not travel as much as some of the other roles. Okay, so their day-to-day, very similar as pre-sales on being the advocate for the customer, the trusted advisor. But what they do day-to-day is a little bit different because it's not so focused on the sales side. So they're about onboarding, customer training, support escalations, a lot of feedback to the customer, giving them visibility into utilization, best practices, and a lot of the weekly, monthly, quarterly cadence meetings with the customer and the account team around what's going on. And I've noticed that some of the roles also ask the TAMs or the CS engineers to do some custom development specifically for what the customer wants to do, which kind of straddles into professional services. And they do a ton of planning, right? Planning amongst the inside the company, like what's coming up, how should we communicate new releases, how do we educate our customers and send out notices. But they also work with customers on upgrades, expansions, best practices, reviews, so the customer knows that there's somebody looking out for them as part of their deployment. And they do a ton of teamwork, working with support, R&D, as well as the accounting. Okay. And then the professional services consultant is also on the post-sale side. They're about implementation, customer development, resident engineering. And I have actually a number of the people on my team come from professional services, which means that they've already been exposed to working with customers, knowing what to say and what not to say. And by the way, we're all learning. The one thing I find is if you come purely from development, that customer filter may not necessarily be there. And it's only as you work with customers over time that realize, certain comments are not taken well by the customer. So those are just some of the skills that you learn over time. And professional services is a great path to just getting exposed to the customer. But your scope is, implementation. You have a particular deliverable that you need to meet. You typically have a project manager who works with you on identifying what the delivery window is, and also a statement of work that identifies what you need to deliver. Okay. So you're typically metriced on utilization. Compensation is, again, broken based on, like, there's base and the variable. So the variable is like, well, typically the breakdown is 90-10 between base and variable. And even the variable piece is split between your utilization and your MBO at the management's discretion. So that 10% of the variable is broken up 75% by utilization and 25% by MBO. Okay. And again, the ideal profile is very similar, right? Technical, able to learn quickly, organized, communicates well. And what I find is people like switch between all these roles, right? They've done development, they've done PS, they've gone to pre-sales, then some of them go into product management, some of them go into marketing. When some people are like, oh, I like professional services better, so they'll go become a professional services consultant, or they'll become a pre-sales engineer again. Or because of what life changes, they'll say, I can't travel, I don't want to travel, I want to do more of a support, right? So travel varies greatly in PS. Some people don't travel at all because they're doing more of the program management components. Other people travel a lot, so it really, really depends, right? And then I think this is the last one that I had was around technical support engineers. 24/7, they really are the backbone to the success of our customers. I'm so thrilled with and very grateful for the support engineers at Redis. We have a team based in Mountain View. Everyone's working remote now, but in general, we have a follow the sun model where we have a team in Mountain View. We also have a team in India, another team in Israel, and I think we have a team in Eastern Europe. But they're metriced on the support tickets to close, the time to close, and the customer satisfaction. What I actually interviewed the manager for support before doing this presentation, and she's like, those are the metrics, but it's really the people that she hires, and what she really likes about the role is like this instant gratification that you get when a customer says thank you because you have solved my problem, right? So the compensation is base and MBO, typically 90-10. MBOs, I believe, are tied to metrics defined by the management. And the profile is pretty well the same. But from a support standpoint, you don't need to present in terms of a broader audience, but I find that our support engineers are very articulate, writing emails because they do a ton of Zendesk work, updating the support tickets, but they're also very good when they're talking to the customers on the phone or via virtual conferencing, because they need to be able to indicate, like, guide the customer on what commands to run, what are the things that they need to look for, and structure them on what they need to do to fix the problem, right? And they also have great troubleshooting skills with pretty broad technical focus. Like, some of them are great at really deciphering what's going on inside the Kubernetes stack versus what's going on in your virtual machines, or what's going on with all of your networking, right? Everything from DNS to IP tables and so on. And the one thing with support is travel. Travel is really minimal. And we have a couple of women who are working in support, and they're fantastic at it. A couple, and the one of the support engineers, she's in Israel. She also took a bit of a sabbatical to take care of her kids, and she was hired on. And my customers love working with her because she's very, very responsive, right? So there's a lot of work-life balance choices that you can make depending on what type of customer-centric roles that you want to take on. Career trait, I'll discuss a couple of other more unusual paths, but career traits in common across all of these roles is being customer centric. There's team engagement. You can't do it alone. There's a ton of variety, by the way. Like, I cannot highlight enough the difference between a developer who works on a feature versus somebody working in the field, getting yourselves exposed to all these different customers and their different use cases. We have customers who are in gaming, right? And I suspect that vast majority of the online games that you have touched Redis technology. And we talk to them about, how are you using it? How do we accelerate your customer satisfaction or your gamers experience? We have customers who are in the dating industry, right? We have customers who use us in the financial side on all the market data that's coming in, and how do you analyze those components. So as you work with our customers, your personal exposure to how the world operates, it's very, very broad. And it's interesting to see how the businesses are run. Typically, these are much faster pace in development, right? Like any given point in time, our SAs could be working with 5, 6, 10 different customers, and they have to identify what are each one of these customer purchasing process like, and how much time do I have to invest in a proof of concept versus a presentation versus a lunch and learn. And in the same case for support is like, they're inundated with lots of support tickets, but some of them are easy to close, some of them require more investigation and deeper learning. But it's never like a 3-month exercise to close a particular ticket, right? There's like an analysis. It's pretty quick on identifying, troubleshooting, engaging with the customer, and then you're moving forward to another ticket potentially. So there's a lot of gratification that comes in much faster because you're working with someone directly versus working on a feature if you're in development and you're not quite sure if anyone's using that feature or functionality a lot. And the last one is education. Every single one of these roles, you will always be learning. And most companies are willing to invest in your learning path, right? On the certifications, on the product, and all of the peripheral technologies that you need to ramp up on to be able to represent that technology, right? So I read through some of the questions, and there were a lot of questions around, how do I get in or pivot from a developer into a customer-centric role? Or if I'm a new grad, and how do you get in? So I wanted to address from 2 different directions. One, if you're relatively junior in just working with technology, if you're about to graduate or you're a new grad, the roles that I colored in red, depending on the company, they are willing to hire people who are junior and train them, right? So if you're a product marketing manager, then some leaders in the product marketing team, they could have a junior technical marketing manager role. Your role could be very narrow. It could be very task oriented. It could be very specific to, this is a list of content that I want you to create. But they'll give you an entryway into product marketing with the technical degree, and then you could start developing your career along that path. Product management and developer advocate are very difficult roles to jump into directly from a junior development role, because both of those roles want someone with some sort of a customer relationship role prior. So I know that a lot of people from pre-sales go into product management, or developers who then do a lot of meetups, and some of the marketing people will get into developer advocacy roles. But there are paths, by the way, it is all over the map. Like a lot of people, like if you ask them, where did you start? It's interesting. I know one person who has an economics degree who went in as an inside sales rep at the company, but he said, I want to be technical. He taught himself how to program. and then switched into inside sales engineering. And now he is a field pre-sales engineer down in Florida. Okay, so the path that you take is, it's quite broad, but there's different entry points that you could identify. Sales engineering, depending on the company, they will recruit directly from universities. So SEV1 was very close to the University of Delaware. So they recruited for inside sales engineering positions directly from engineering and CS roles from University of Delaware. And some of the people they hired are amazing. And I just spoke to one of the SAs, and yeah, she's been in this role now for I would say close to 6-7 years at SEV1. She's the #1 SA in the company, right? So the type of roles that you may be looking for, titles like junior sales engineer, inside sales engineer, corporate sales engineer, it's typically over the phone activity, but tons of learning opportunity. And in this, in the COVID situation, everyone is doing all the work remote anyway. We're not actually doing face-to-face calls. This is a great pathway that you could try. Okay. Technical trainer, and you think like that's kind of an odd one, because you think if you're training someone, you'd have a little bit more, you should have more experience coming in. I actually find that technical training roles, people are willing to hire people who have technical experience, but maybe not customer-centric experience before, right? Partially because as a technical trainer, you're expected to train people. And depending on what type of training they want you to do, especially similar to what I had at Oracle, like I had a ton of training, and then and it's continual training as I traveled everywhere, because not everyone can travel. So technical trainers, they're willing to take people who, do not have explicit training experience and really ramp them up. Having said it, Redis Labs technical trainers are quite different, because we're all about creating training content via Redis University, all of the Redis explainers on YouTube. So it's not as travel-centric, I find. And our technical trainers have to do video screening. They literally have to do a video test, do a lot of the development tests. So it really depends, but I think for certain types of companies and technologies, technical training is a good entry point. And then customer success engineer and support engineers, I loved just getting into the support role. It taught me a ton. And I think for most companies, they're willing to hire someone more junior, but invest their time into ramping them up. And in our side, I was talking to one of our support leads. He's like, it takes them 6 months to train up a support engineer. But if they find that somebody has the capacity as well as the energy and the technical mindset to be able to learn, they'll hire them on and they'll actually train them, right? So these are the different entry points that you should consider, right? So given all of that, I decided to analyze, if I were to rank between technical depth, customer interaction, public presentations, and travel, where do all of these different roles fit in? So in general, if you don't want to travel, you should not focus on a lot of the product marketing, product manager, developer advocate, some of the sales engineering and the technical training side, because those tend to require a lot more travel. So you could look at technical account management, customer success, and support as paths where you're engaging with customers. It's very interactive, but you don't have to travel for whatever work-life balance requirements you have. If you are more social, you want to talk to people, you love doing presentations, there's a whole group of roles that you could get into. And across all of them, obviously there's a lot of customer interactions, and they typically require a lot of technical depth. But I would say technical marketing and product management are less so compared to some of the other post-sales types of roles. Okay, let's see. I'm over my time, Kat. Is it still okay for me to continue?
Yeah, you could cover the hiring part. I think you'll be okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
So on the hiring side, I think some people are asked what is a hiring process? What do I look for? I find what works for me is referrals, because the person who's giving me the referral is someone that I trust or I've worked with before as part of my company. So it's when you get a referral, I score that a lot higher than if I got a resume just directly from like, you know, just the vast pool that we send out via LinkedIn or Glassdoor, wherever we send out our job postings. One of the things as I interview the candidates is where they could show me that they can, you know, do the type of things that we think we'd like them to do. So show us you can means, you know, have you taken the initiative to be able to, or is able to articulate doing something similar to what we're asking you to do, right? And then if we're giving you a technology, like a exam, not an exam, but an exercise, tell me that you can actually do this, or show me that you could do it and you're reading the instructions and you're doing the right thing, right? I find that on a resume, ranking the relevant skills really helps me because, you know, like I said, there's a ton of skill sets that we're looking for. I'm comfortable with you not having everything, but if there are things that you're comfortable with, but you know, like where you've been exposed, but it's lower ranked versus where you're really, really deep on other technologies, ranking the skills I find is very nice as a summary as part of the resume. Follow up when you're doing an interview. It's weird because I find like some people are really good at follow up. Other people are not following up at all. And maybe it depends on the type of market, but a good follow up email should not take you a long time, but it's good common courtesy to do it. And big factor is like, you know, are you pleasant to be with? As in, would you be a good coworker to have? What doesn't work? Buzzword overload. I see resumes and I know why people do it because they want to go through all of the like AI type of word screeners. But sometimes a resume comes in and I see like 100 different buzzwords on every technology ever touched. I can't possibly accept that you would know all these technology stacks, right? When they don't follow instructions for technical exercise or not putting in the effort. I had one person, when we asked them to, you know, create a presentation on your own, he had a USB stick, and he told me that he downloaded the presentation off the internet, and the presentation was about why we should exercise. I'm like, okay, like when we're asking you to present, please put in some effort to actually do the presentation. And, you know, not asking questions, right? Be curious if you're interested in the role and the company. Soft skills that I find the hardest to screen, and this is across the board for all the managers I speak with, you know, is a candidate, do they have the ability to learn quickly? Are they coachable? Do they have a sense of urgency? How much accountability will they have to the customer? Are they a good problem solver? Do they have good listening skills? So I find, you know, tech skills are easy to screen for. Soft skills are really, really hard. So we'll go through different exercises, scenario type of discussions to assess for these. And even then, you know, there's many times where I realize, you know, my soft skills radar is not as good as I think it should be. Okay. So these are the things to watch out for as you start interviewing for some of these roles. So where to start? A friend of mine once said, I am my own product manager. And when I first heard her say it, that, whoa, that's an interesting position. Having said it, the more I interviewed people, the more I realized that she was absolutely right. And, you know, she's done great. She's now a CTO of a very large company running her own product set, because it turns out they have multiple CTOs at that company. But some of the things that she described was, you know, when she goes into Starbucks, she'll actually talk to the person in front of her and talk to the person behind her, just to see whether it's, you know, there's a connection and that they should network. So as part of her view of herself as a product manager, she'll do the market research about, you know, like based on my skill set, where am I compared to what the market needs, right? She'll also do a lot of the marketing, you know, look at the networks, go to meet reps. So that, you know, back to you as a person looking for your next career move, look at yourself and assess what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and take a look at, you know, what are the things that you need to do to market yourself. Networking is great. LinkedIn is great. Meetups, I find, are great. But honestly, if you're a passive meetup attendee, then it's not going to give you as much results as if you're an active meetup attendee. And what I mean by that is volunteer, participate, own certain types of meetups. Say you'll do a lightning talk about a topic or a project that you've been working on. You know, go to conferences, present at conferences, submit papers to describe kind of some of the projects that you've worked on. And coffee meetings, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to meet with you and have a short coffee meeting. And, and, and as you explain where you're currently at, they'll connect you with their network. Okay. And yeah. And then, skills, GitHub projects, cloud certifications, open source projects, and meetups. Like there's so many ways in which you could hone your technical skill set depending on what avenue you want to take. Communications, go to Toastmasters, go check out improv, just go present at conference presentations if you're comfortable, or post on YouTube, right? The technology is great in that you could do a lot of self-promotion and self-improvement without going anywhere. And then on the finance side, take a look at some of the titles that I posted and see what the salary range is, and determine, whether that is the right amount for you, whether that is the type of salary that you want to take or pivot from, depending on where you are as a developer versus what you want to go to. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. I'm a little bit over my time. If you have any questions, here's my LinkedIn profile. And Kat, if there's anyone on the line or other questions coming up, I'll open it up.
I think the questions that were in the chat were covered pretty much in your presentation.
Okay.
Just one question about compensation.
Okay.
So Jenny asked, the compensation is sort of correlated to the company's product and services competitiveness in the market, and also tech trends changes per understanding. So how volatile are the variables portion?
Let me see. So in general, the structure that I described for the different roles of like whatever the total salary goal is, the percentage of base versus variable doesn't change too drastically, right? But that total like compensation package does change dramatically depending on the company. And some startup companies, they will pay you less, but then they'll give you a lot more options as potential upside. Larger companies who do not issue options or stock grants, they'll maybe, and they're already a public company, they may grant you restricted, not restricted stock options, but the restricted stock units. And the interesting things are that those vest where I think certain companies, you only get like maybe 10, 20% in the first 2 years, but at the end of the 2 years, you get a huge chunk at 50% of the stock units, right? So it does vary a lot. Every company is quite different. But if you take a look at some of the salary-based links that I described, a lot of people talk about what their compensation structure is.
Great, thank you.
Hopefully that answered it.
Did anybody else have any questions? If you want, you could turn on your mic and ask a question. We can maybe take one or two brief ones just because we're running a little behind.
Long. Sorry, my presentation was a lot longer than anticipated.
No, it was very thorough. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions? No? Okay. Well, if you do ever think of any questions that you would like to answers to or want to be addressed, you could email, respond to the registration email. It's my email, and I can pass it on to Jane, or she has shared her LinkedIn profile on the presentation. So feel free to reach out to her and connect with her. And it was really great to meet everybody. And thank you so much, Jane, for an awesome presentation. And in case you want to share this with your friends, we will have this video up in short time on our YouTube channel. So you could subscribe to our channels and visit our website to get more information on future events. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.